Alright, Gama Joba Mego Brebo. In this video, I wanted to talk about one of the keys to mastering Georgian or to learning Georgian very well, and that is learning the Georgian verb. Now, this is a table that I think is very helpful in categorizing verbs. When we have a Georgian verb, like how do we organize it or how do we group it with other similar ones? And one of the ways we do that is by putting it into different classes. Now, I've seen different authors use 3 classes, 4 classes, maybe 5. Now, I don't know the exact proper academic groupings, but I found that this is pretty accurate and helpful. So in the first class, you have things like transitives and medials, sometimes known as V verbs. Transitives essentially are just verbs that have a direct object. I think medials are, it's like a weird one where it's kind of a direct object, but not really. I don't know exactly, but the second class is intransitive, so things that don't have a direct object. Generally, there are kind of some exceptions. Motion verbs, and then this also can be considered V verbs, but there's some distinctions here that I think are important. In class 3, you have indirect verbs and statives, otherwise known as M verbs. Now, kind of going into what each of those different terms are is not really important for now. What I want to focus on is that, so in Georgian you have the 11 different tenses. Now, why I think this table is helpful is because, for example, in class 1, for the present tense, the verbs that are in here tend to kind of have similar patterns to how you conjugate them. So kind of once you learn the template for this one, anytime you acquire a new verb, it's pretty easy to just use the template that you've learned. The same thing for class 2 verbs in the present. They all share similarities in their patterns. And so will M verbs or class 3 verbs in the present. They'll share a set of patterns. So just kind of going down the line, present, imperfect, present, subjunctive, you can tally it up and you get about 33 roughly sets of patterns that you need to learn. Now, this is not exact because, for instance, in the aorist tense or the past tense, just in class 1 verbs, I mean, this is a monster. This is probably one of the most complicated ones, I think, is learning the patterns for past tense here. And in this, you might have 10 or 20 kind of different patterns, and so that's a difficult one. But roughly speaking, this is just a way to see that, okay, I've learned maybe class 1 in the present, and now I can move on to class 2 in the present. Once you do that, you get class 3 in the present, and then you pretty much got most of the patterns for present out of the way, and you're good. Um, so I think for me, early on, it was helpful to have, well, I didn't have this kind of table, which is why it was tricky, but eventually when I put this together, it was helpful to see, okay, how many more tenses do I need to cover, or what, maybe with M verbs, like I don't really know very well the perfect and the pluperfect or something. So it kind of just helped me to see what the big picture is for me to really get good at Georgian. What do I have left to cover? So this kind of encapsulates most of, at least with the verb and conjugations, what I need to learn. Now, this table also kind of has to do with cases as well. That I won't talk about real deep, real in depth, but basically each of these numbers, or kind of, I guess, a grouping of conjugations, they tend to share similar cases as well. And actually, there's more commonalities. So it's not like you have to memorize 33 sets of patterns and cases. In reality, actually, these all share the same case patterns, and these also share the same case patterns. So it's actually fairly easy. But this grouping it according to these classes is what is really helpful. So I also say that because I've been making some videos that have been kind of going one by one with each of these groups. So I made a video on class 1 verbs in the present, and I'm thinking maybe people don't really know. When they hear that, they're like, okay, well, how many of these do I need to learn? And this kind of puts that grouping into this whole big picture here. And I also made a video on class 2 verbs in the present. So people know that, okay, we covered this one and we covered this one, and next we'll try and cover this one. So I've got 3 out of 33. And that kind of brings me to my next point about efficiency and getting more advanced in Georgian, especially those who want to kind of go beyond just kind of an intermediate or beginner level and go to becoming advanced in Georgian, that you don't want to just be acquiring verbs one by one. You know, you want to try and develop the patterns so that you can start to create your own words, that, you know, you don't have to have heard a word to be able to say a different conjugation of it. So it's, I think, much more efficient to learn the patterns with this. And so you're thinking, you know, roughly I got to learn 33 different sets of patterns. Well, you're probably going to learn, you know, try and learn 33 words anyway. So why not learn the patterns, and which will result in being able to say maybe hundreds or even maybe thousands of different forms of words. So I think that's much more efficient in my mind, rather than just acquiring verbs one by one. I will say that I think it is useful. I mean, a lot of times people will just pick words that they think they'll use and they want to use and they've that are common, you know, which is good. But I think both are important. So learning the patterns so that you can create a bunch of words, as well as learning just acquiring single useful words. But all right, so this is already over 6 minutes, so I will end the video there. Hopefully that was helpful, just again to give you a broad overview of the Georgian verb and how to categorize them according to tenses and classes. So if you have any questions, go ahead and send me a message or leave me a comment. And until next time, Drovit.